Anzac Day hasn't always looked like this. It has ebbed and flowed with society sentiment and history over the past 105 years.
On the first anniversary of the Anzac landing, there is widespread understanding that this day is going to be commemorated.
But it's the Middle East, where so many of our troops are based in 1916, that is the unlikely location of many first Anzac Day events.
We have an Australian force that is partly in Egypt, continuing training in the desert, and has partly been shipped to France. In both of those places there are military parades. They have marches past senior officers and church services to commemorate the landing. At the same time, this is considered a celebration. They're celebrating a successful landing against all the odds. And so there are sports carnivals in the afternoon and picnics and extra rations and a celebratory atmosphere as well. Anzac Day is commemorated at a grassroots level every year, but it doesn't become a public holiday until 1927, when it's formally made a day of national commemoration. The first formalised ceremonies we recognise as happening in 1929 are brought out of this melange of activity that's been going on around Australia since the year after the event itself happened.
During the 1930s, Anzac Day marches in our capitals, especially Sydney and Melbourne, are extraordinary in scale and sentiment.
The march begins, 43,000 men. An Anzac army 7 miles long, watched with pride by 750,000 people as they tramp a path of glory on this Anzac Day of days.
These marches hold hundreds of ex-servicemen who served overseas during the First World War, but they're attended really widely by not just families and friends but other members of the public, and they're a huge spectacle. Rows of uniforms and horses and dragging guns, and they're a really huge activity and a hugely celebratory sort of atmosphere and a carnival atmosphere to commemorate the end of a successful war.
But another world war causes more changes in our outlook and narrative.
What new stories will this pile of stone enshrine? Of Tobruk, of Greece, Crete, Syria, and who shall know? New vital history is being written on land, sea and air by men of our blood.
Anzac Day is hugely popular, but it takes on a different sort of importance during the Second World War. So the War Memorial itself is opened during the Second World War.
Australia gave unsparingly, ungrudgingly, the best and the bravest of our young manhood. And it is in their honour that this memorial has been erected.
And the first Anzac Day held here, which is in 1942, was attended by 600 people. Many of them are wearing uniforms and are currently serving in the armed forces in the current war.
Post-World War II and during the 1950s, Anzac Day continues to draw large crowds. But a change is looming. Soldiers who'd returned home from Vietnam often found it hard to make the abrupt transition to normal life for all they'd gone through. Their situation was sometimes made worse by public hostility or indifference to their experiences.
In periods like the 60s and 70s, when there's a larger anti-war sentiment in society, people begin to stop participating in Anzac Days.
In Sydney, in October 1987, the 25th anniversary of Australia's commitment in Vietnam was marked by a welcome home parade, seen by many veterans as a move at last to give them some of the recognition they'd been denied. Vietnam veterans were eventually embraced by the nation, and Anzac Day evolved again as interest was stirred in new generations. Children and grandchildren of veterans becoming more and more involved.
And so they were brought back into the fold of Anzac Day, which is the way it should be. Anzac Day has very strongly turned into a commemorative event that encompasses all servicemen and women, so peacekeepers today, servicemen and women who served in Vietnam, in Korea, in East Timor and around the globe. So it is very inclusive. And again, we're starting to get very large numbers at Anzac Day ceremonies.
For the centenary of the Anzac landings in 2015, some 120,000 people attended the dawn service and 30,000 for the national service at the Australian War Memorial. On the old Western Front battlefields in Belgium and France, Anzac Day is commemorated with our former allies. The service in Villers-Bretonneux in France is one of the largest.
It's commemorated in various places throughout France as well. Not just in the large ceremonies we see at Villers-Bretonneux, there are smaller ceremonies that's happened in Bullecourt and various other places. It is also commemorated in a lot of important sites from the Second World War to this day, and the Thai-Burma Railway in Changi, been commemorated in Kapyong while the Australians were in Korea, in the Korean conflict.
Perhaps most significant of all is the dawn service at Anzac Cove on the Gallipoli Peninsula, where up to 20,000 Australian and New Zealand backpackers have been known to sleep on the beach just to be present on the day.
It's a part of our culture that Australia has taken everywhere, but also it's been shared by those places that it's affected as well. It is a global phenomenon of an Australian bent.
While this year may see the smallest number of attendees yet at the Australian War Memorial, across the country and around the world due to the current global pandemic, there is no doubt that the support for our servicemen and women stands as strong as ever across our nation as we come together in spirit to commemorate.